Hello, this is S.K. Williams, and today I would like to talk to you about Christianity, abortion, and statistics. The reason I'm making this video is because I'm actually making a longer video at the time I'm recording this about atheists and how they use statistics to prove something or other about how Christianity is not good or atheists are superior and the like. And again, this isn't all atheists, it's just militant ones, the ones who have to go out of their way to attack religion. Whilst doing this research, I've read a few threads and comment sections, and what's interesting is that even when they are close, people often make very huge mistakes. What do I mean by that? Well, back in 2001, a Pew Review study was released that found that the majority of women who contracted an abortion were Christian. The atheist community, of course, jumped on this, claiming that Christians were more likely to get abortions than atheists. This, of course, wasn't true. Now, I don't remember off the top of my head the exact numbers, and I don't need to, but for the sake of argument, it was something like 22 women out of every 1,000 who identified as Protestant had an abortion, around 24 out of every 1,000 Catholics did, and around 32 of every 1,000 atheist women did. So really, atheists were more likely to get abortions, not less likely. Don't hold fast to those numbers, though, because I pulled those out of memory, and they may not be reliable, but the point is it was something in that range. The reality is that the statistic actually proved the opposite of what the atheists claimed. But what was really interesting is that atheists continue to use this statistic even today, despite the fact that, whilst I'm recording this, it's 2019, and that makes it an 18-year-old statistic. But that comes with the problem that I'm noting today. I was reading a Reddit thread from 2016, and it brought this up with an atheist bringing it out to show how Christians are more likely to get abortions, and other atheists correctly pointed out that this doesn't actually say a Christian is more likely to get an abortion because Christians are simply the majority at everything else. But then many said, well, that may be true, but it still shows that being a Christian doesn't make you less likely to get an abortion, because according to statistics, around 71% of Americans identify as Christian, but 70% of the women seeking abortions are Christian, meaning that it's on par in what you would expect, all things considered. Meaning that Christians are not less likely to get abortions, and that Christians are hypocrites for getting abortions, which of course was brought up. Now, the problem with this is that they were looking at the percent of the American population that identified as Christian in 2016 and comparing it to a statistic about abortion from 2001. But it's a well-known fact that the percent of Americans who identify as Christian has declined in that length of time. While it's true that the current, as of 2016 when that thread was composed, percent of Christians in America was 71%, and this is roughly the same as the percent of women seeking abortions according to the 2001 survey, in reality approximately 81 to 84% of the American population identified as Christian in 2001, meaning that Christians were statistically less likely to get abortions to a significant level. Yet the Redditors showed the statistic from 2001 and compared it to the demographics of 2016. Of course, there were the usual claims of Christians are hypocrites. Christians will say that abortion is murder, abortion is wrong, and will even commit terrorist acts by blowing up abortion clinics and murdering abortion clinic doctors. They will tell you you're damned to hell for all eternity if you get an abortion, and they will condemn and shame anyone who gets an abortion until it's them facing the very real situation of an unwanted pregnancy. Then the Christian is perfectly fine getting an abortion themselves, so while they will condemn others for getting an abortion, they themselves can. with the other usual claims that the reason Christians get abortions more often is because the Christian church teaches you not to use contraception, and they teach abstinence-only education. Neither of these are necessarily true, but it does beg the question. Is what they're saying true? Well, as noted, the statistical variance between the percent of the Christian population in 2001 and 2016 was not taken into account. In reality, it isn't really true that the percent of women seeking abortions in the United States is roughly equal to the percent of Christians in the population altogether. In fact, the general population numbers are 11% higher than those seeking abortions. They're just comparing the statistics to a different time period to create that illusion. And of course, claims of Christian hypocrisy, while popular in the atheist community, don't entirely work considering that most of what they say isn't backed up by evidence. For example, do you have any evidence that Christian women are having sex and getting pregnant because they were taught abstinence-only education and don't understand much about sex, or they are not using contraception because they don't know about contraception, so when they give in to their urges, they use it, and it's all the Christian church's fault because the Christian church teaches abstinence-only education. They don't really have statistics on any of that. But what's worse is that they make these assumptions. For example, they assume that the Christian church teaches that you should not use contraception. I even read a comment or two on the Reddit thread where they said, well, if you're going to commit a sin by fornicating, it's at least a less of a sin if you don't use contraception. And that was made sarcastically. The point being that the Christian church teaches that contraception is wrong and you shouldn't use it. Christians have condemned contraception altogether. But this isn't actually true for the most part, especially in America. It is true that the Catholic Church condemns contraception. But the atheist community tends to combine Catholicism with evangelicals to create this weird hybrid. Then again, it is true that some evangelicals also don't like contraception, but the majority of evangelicals in America have taken a morally neutral stance towards contraception itself. While they would still frown upon sex outside of marriage, they don't really have a problem with a man and his wife choosing to use a condom when they have sex, for example. So the idea that the Christian church condemns contraception is committing the same generalization fallacy that atheists are wont to do, assuming that there's this one organization called the Christian church that all Christians belong to, and that has consistent teachings that all Christians are supposed to believe in, when that simply isn't the case. Indeed, the percent of evangelicals who oppose contraception is around 10%, maybe 15% at the most. And the only real church that condemns contraception on a broad scale is the Catholic Church, which represents only around 20% of the American population, or maybe 25%. So it just isn't true that they are having sex outside of marriage and thus sinning, but at least making the sin better by not using contraception. Not that it matters, as even Catholicism wouldn't use that argument, because they wouldn't say, well, having sex outside of marriage is a sin, but it's even more of a sin to use contraception, so I won't. That's not how that works. If they're willing to commit one sin, they're going to be willing to commit another, and it doesn't really matter anyway, since it's not like you've committed one sin, you get 100 sin points, but you use contraception, you're going to use another 100 sin points. It's not cumulative like that. But yeah, the majority of Christians actually don't have a problem with contraception. Which brings up another point. Everyone knows that Christians are pro-life and oppose abortion, which is what makes Christians hypocrites when they themselves have abortions, because the Christians oppose abortions and picket outside of abortion clinics. Or do they? There are actually churches that are neutral on the position of abortion and make no stance at it at all. And there are others that are even firmly in favor of abortion as a woman's right, meaning that those churches do not teach that abortion is a sin, and as a consequence would not instill in the people who go there a sense of shame if they've had abortions. So what's the point? The atheist community assumes that all Christians are pro-life. It's as irritating as assuming that all Christians are creationists and believe the earth is only 6,000 years old and evolution didn't happen, or assuming all Christians have the same basic views of homosexuality. It's one of these things that you keep finding the atheist community do that doesn't always make very much sense. Why are you assuming all Christians are the same? And in this particular context, it doesn't matter if you are pro-life or not. What matters is, can you demonstrate that the Christian women seeking abortions belong to a church that teaches that abortion is a sin, or held religious views in which they opposed abortion? Because if those Christian women had no moral issue with abortion, then they aren't really hypocrites if they have an abortion, are they? And yet the atheist community calls them hypocrites, because Christians are pro-life and condemn abortion. You don't really know what these women's religious beliefs are beyond identifying as Christian, which is a very broad category. You do know that the statistic is from 2001 and is very old, and you should have thought about that before comparing the statistic to the 2001 demographics, assuming that the percent of women getting abortions who identify as Christians is equal to the percent of Christians in the general population, showing no difference. You should have realized all of that, but you didn't. And yet this statistic is trotted out to shame Christians for how hypocritical they are, and how Christians are no more moral than other people. And that final one really bothers me, because the atheist community keeps saying that they are for a woman's right to choose. They believe in women's reproductive rights. The atheist community insists that getting an abortion is not immoral. And yet, they claim that because a Christian woman is just as likely as anyone else to get an abortion, that Christians are no more moral than others, as if the woman getting an abortion makes her immoral. So which is it? Is abortion an immoral act that someone should be shamed for? Or is it not an immoral act? Because if you're an atheist who says that abortion is not immoral, then how can you say Christians are proven to not be more moral than anyone else because Christians get abortions? That's insanity. Again, you may call them hypocrites if they oppose abortion, but even then, not all Christians do. And it seems like a rather shallow analysis. So, realistically, it's not a very intelligent argument. But then again, most atheist arguments aren't, in spite of the fact that atheists are, on average, more intelligent than religious people, and they use more logic and reason and know more about religion, and science has proven it. The arguments I keep seeing are of this ilk. Very poorly thought out, and obviously not true. At any rate, I don't have much else to say, so thank you, God bless, and goodbye.